Right. So shifting gears a little bit to a not totally unrelated story in some ways. You did a follow-up piece, a new piece on Tara Reid. You, of course, covered her last year, and now you have an update. And, Jack, you've said this, how, you saw it as once the education stuff came out, like that was it. Even though that's not really relevant to her claims, but
Right.
it was just, and I know this from people who were like kind of otherwise supportive of the story. I think some people were just looking at a way to kind of get, stop thinking about it. And
Right.
for a lot of people, that was it. It was like this sacred institution.
It's this thing where we can say, well, I mean, where we can say, it does not have anything to do with the claims that she was making. I mean, just to be clear, it has absolutely nothing to do with the claims she made about Joe Biden. But it was kind of, I think it was kind of seen, in my opinion, as like the off-ramp for the mainstream media, who was very clearly looking for an off-ramp. And for a lot of Joe Biden supporters who already wanted to call her a liar and were passing around like threads by those two weird Krasenstein brothers as evidence for why she's a liar. I think it was like the nail in the coffin for them to be like, well, she perjured herself, so she's a liar, even when it wasn't even fully clear then that she had perjured herself, because that requires, knowingly lying in a court of law, and it was unclear even then, whether, first of all, if it was true that she didn't have this undergraduate degree, and second of all, if she knew that she didn't have it at the time. So I guess that's all just to say that, this was seized on to discredit her for totally unrelated allegations, and it feels like by the mainstream press, who was just sort of like tentatively covering her, it was used as the off-ramp to be like, okay, close the door, we're done.
Yeah, and if you think of that nail in the coffin as being hit by several different hammers, I think it comes back to life even more, because the first hit of the hammer being her college saying that she didn't graduate, and that becoming a story in the press, and then the second swing of the hammer coming from her law school saying, we're going to revoke your law degree for this. So now, instead of an expert witness on domestic violence with a law degree, she's a liar who's about to lose her law degree. And then the third swing of the hammer, like you said, comes from the Monterey County district attorney, who says, we're going to investigate you and possibly prosecute you for perjury. And so now anybody who wants an off-ramp has the easiest one that's ever been provided. This is a person who might go to prison for lying. You're expecting me to believe them? It's and even if you're not looking for an off-ramp, if this is the news that you're receiving, it's going to lead you to question the credibility of the person in question. But it turns out that it's a much more complicated story than we heard a year ago.
So can you tell us about? Can you just summarize, because I kind of jumped into it, as is often the case when I talk about stuff. Can you just set up what your latest story uncovered?
Sure. And so the question was.
And this is, by the way, everyone knows this, right? Tara Reid accused Joe Biden of sexually assaulting her and sexually harassing her back in the 90s. And Ryan was the first person to write about it. I had Tara Reid on the show. And the media we have to do an entirely different episode on this. And Jack, you and I can talk about this after. But like, the media took a ridiculously long amount of time to get to the story. And Ryan, of course, as someone who broke the Blasey Ford story, saw that firsthand, that discrepancy firsthand. But let's just focusing for right now on what this new article, what your new piece goes through. And feel free, if there's comments are distracting, you can go full screen so you don't see them, and we'll get the good ones.
Oh, I don't even.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
I don't even see the comments. So apologies to anybody that thinks that I might be ignoring them. And so the question was, did she graduate from undergrad? And actually, from a journalistic perspective, that's actually tends to be a fairly easy question to answer. And if you're writing a profile of somebody or you're investigating somebody, it's oftentimes one of the first calls you make. When I was profiling Ambassador Yusuf Al-Otaiba, who is the United Arab Emirates ambassador, and this plays this outsider's role in Washington, D.C., one of the most powerful guys in town, he had said he graduated from Georgetown University. So while I was reporting that story, I called Georgetown. All you have to do is call the registrar, and you say, "Did so and so graduate? Here's their last name, here's their first name," and they're supposed to answer that yes or no. They're not supposed to give you any records, any transcripts, any details, but they can tell you whether or not they graduated. And I think they can tell you whether or not what their major was. And Georgetown was like, actually no, he didn't graduate. So I got a nice little nugget in the story that this ambassador had been saying he was graduating, but in fact he hadn't. So one reason that it took a very long time for this to emerge with Tara Reid and Antioch is that she graduated from law school, and therefore you would check with the law school. Yeah, here's her law degree. But you can't get into law school without going to college. And so journalists, including myself, for a month or more, just took for granted that she had an undergraduate degree. And it was also kind of beside the point. If somebody has a law school degree, what are you even wondering about the undergraduate degree? You're beyond that at that point. It's like if somebody has a PhD trying to figure out if they have a master's, like, well,
or if they went to kindergarten, elementary school. I mean, do you try to find out the full educational history of a subject?
Right. And so Antioch tells CNN first that she did not graduate. And when CNN asked Tara Reid about this, she said, I was in this protected program and I had gone through a legal name change. And so it was difficult for them to match my old Social Security number with my new one and to match up all the credits. And there was an arrangement made between Antioch and the law school where the degree was conferred, privately that way. CNN took that back to Antioch, and Antioch said there was no protected program. And so it's, so that from CNN's perspective there, and for anybody reading that story, they're throwing one lie on top of another. What Tara meant was that she was in this protective program, not that the program was part of Antioch. And in fact, there are court documents that show she got the legal name change, that there was this program run through these domestic violence shelters where she moved, from California up to Seattle. So that program did exist. Tara got, through the help of a lawyer, she got access to her academic files, which took a fairly long time. And there is evidence in those files of communication between Antioch and her law school that backs up her claim that that because of the way that this was unfolding, there was some special private arrangement made. But the documents are not conclusive one way or the other about what happened. But it is fairly conclusive to the fact that you can't say with any authority that she was, lying and putting on some just fabrication around this whole thing. Like it roughly matches up. Now the records are incomplete and it's a little inconclusive, but it's close enough to what she said that you can't say that she's just making this up.
Yeah. So I mean, the New York Times, just to be clear, well, actually, I have a question. Why did they even look into the undergrad? They were just going through, like. Well,
they were calling everybody, who she'd ever interacted with, and so when you make a dive that deep, you're going to call. I would assume that they reached out to the university.
And did they have did they do that with Christine Blasey Ford? Did they talk to her undergraduate?
I highly doubt it, because in her case too, she's a professor at a Stanford affiliated school. So you just wouldn't think to go back to her undergrad and say, did she graduate from undergrad? I doubt it. Maybe they did though, and we never heard about it because the answer was yes. Presumably the answer was yes. I mean, she also went. Everybody knew she went to, what was the name of the school? One of these fanciest Washington D.C. Prep schools.
Right.
So nobody would assume that she somehow became a professor while not graduating from undergrad. And also, if she did, like, good for her.
Right. Good grip.
I mean,
so what?
Is this not like on the law school or something? You know what I mean?
Right,
like that's like kind
thing,
of how I feel. Like is like if you apply to law school, they probably are checking on the records of where you graduated. Like, is it truly that easy? Can you skip college? Typically, I guess is what I'm asking.
Right.
Could I, for example, if I wrote a letter, get into med school? As someone who dropped out of screenwriting college.
Right, and she got her law degree records, and in her law school records, there are copies of emails between the dean and the registrar really there saying, hey, like, because somebody in the registrar's office flagged it and said, hey, we don't have a degree on file here, and then there's an email that says, the dean was brought in just to let you know this has been arranged, don't worry about it, and the person's like, oh well, I will. Would you like me to apologize to her? I'm sorry for flagging this. I didn't realize that there was some separate arrangement. Right. So So right there in the law school records, and the law school has dropped its suggestion that they're going to revoke the law degree, and the prosecutors have said that they're not filing any perjury charges.
So, and by the way, of course, Brian Frederick points this out, and we should do a piece on this, Jack. We should do a mashup or something, or side by side. Like, Biden lied about graduating with honors. I mean, Biden has lied more about his background than Tara has. Right. I mean, it's been those things have been proven.
It's almost the kind of thing. Obviously, Biden had to drop out of one of her presidential races because of plagiarism. He lied about graduating with honors. But again, all that stuff almost barely matters to me because I care more about like the policy reasons why he shouldn't be president. Right. But yes, you're absolutely right, Katie. That like.
He said he was on like a full academic scholarship, and he wasn't.
He lied about where he was in his class. He lied about the academic scholarship. He plagiarized his speech. He lied about getting arrested in South Africa. He lied about the man who killed his...
either in college or law school for plagiarism.
Yeah.
So that was before his presidential campaign blew up over that too. Yeah.
Right. And then he lies about South Africa. He lies about the man who had the fatal car crash with his wife. Said he drank his lunch instead of eating it. There was no evidence ever that he was had a drinking problem. And in fact, I don't know the appropriate way to say this. It sounds like I'm a victim. Like, she had done the thing with driving. She had done the not careful thing with the car. Like, he wasn't reckless, the driver.
Right.
Who and what else? I mean, then it's like more political stuff, Social Security and all that stuff. But that's of course, like you were saying, Jack, that's the important stuff. Like, but we also would like to think that, the standard of honesty for a president is higher than it is for someone who accuses him of sexual assault. Like, if you're going to say she's a liar and can't be listened to, then by that standard, Biden can't be either.
Right, and by the standard, you had, you would then have two people who are not fairly credible, and so then you have to sort out what you believe, if that's where you are, because
yeah, and then of course if you want to stack them side by side, even if we think that certain things, he's much more, to give him credit, he's pretty prolific.
Yes.
Don't want to deny him his agency.
He had to apologize for inflating his involvement in the civil rights movement, which turned out not to be anything at all. Corn Pop, actually, that turned out to be true.
Thing to true, right? Yeah.
Like that one, bizarrely enough, checked out, and perhaps because it was so bizarre, you can't make that one up.
But that was him coming back from saying that he was involved in the civil rights movement, and no one could find anything. So he was like, "Well, I was a lifeguard at a black pool."
Right.
And that's where he met Corn Pop, and they had a showdown, and he compared him to Esther Waters, which is a pretty good dig.
Esther Williams.
Esther Williams, sorry.
A famous diver at the time. I've done my deep dives into Corn Pop,
no
pun
intended.
I have to rate PolitiFact rating true that Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he was a bad dude that did exist.
Yeah. But and he talks about how the kids used to stroke his golden leg hairs up and down. Remember that?
Right.
Like, literally, that was, he talked about that. But
I believe that too, actually.
Probably blocked it out, though, yeah. So there are all these documents, and I think like some of the things that are really interesting are that, as you said, they clearly refer to a memo or something in her files. So there's clearly something there, and that was enough to have the law school say like, okay, sorry, yeah, we got it, right? Now, she then becomes also, she has a job reviewing applications for Antioch. And this is another thing. And we can get into, you know what I forgot to read is actually, this is like, because you said the off-ramp, right, was the school, alleged perjury. And also, to be fair to people who saw that as an off-ramp, like, this is so much better of a thing than just poverty shaming her. Which they did a lot of. So people probably were so happy about this. Like, oh, good, I can jump on board with this without, like, co-signing a totally classist smear of a woman who like was the survivor of domestic violence. And, this is so much more palatable and black and white. Now, it wasn't. But just in terms of the optics of it, it was a lot better than these, it's disgusting. And, like, the Times like spoke to many of her landlords. They didn't call it was a piece. They wrote a piece like filled with landlord anecdotes.
Oh, that was Politico. Yeah.
Oh, it's Politico. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But didn't even frame it that way. It was like they were just talking to different people who knew her, but they were all people she was paying like for housing. So
I got a lot of landlords that would talk a lot of shit about me. I really do. I really do.
All true. All true.
Yeah, it's true, actually.
So reading at your, I'm just going to go back to your article, Ryan. So you write, the New York Times dialed up the charge, writing about her time in law school. She was so poor, she had to borrow law books and occasionally brought her daughter to class when she couldn't find childcare. Her classmate, Jennifer Robinson, who now practices law in Seattle, recalled her heavy, dark sadness and said it appeared to be a real, genuine fear and was a huge part of her identity. Okay, so we know she was very poor and had to bring her daughter to law school, which is kind of, in my book, that's already disqualifying. I don't really want to hear what you have to say about sexual assault unless you make a certain amount of income. But here's the real thing, right? She also harbored a secret. She had never obtained the undergraduate degree required for law school admission. So this is something that Tara's lawyer, right, is talking about. And you, of course, you say, Ryan, the claim that Reed harbored a secret is unusual for the Times, as the paper often tells readers that while it can describe actions, it can't penetrate the thoughts of its subjects in order to know whether they are lying. The Times story not only claimed that Reed hadn't graduated, but also that Reed knew she had not graduated, casting doubt on Reed's explanation that there was an arrangement between her college and law school that was connected to a protected program for domestic violence victims. And then you said the Post, meanwhile, did not go as far as the Times. In its response to Reed, the paper noted that the university publicly claimed Reed had not graduated, and the Post merely reported the discrepancy between Reed's claim and the one made by her school. Indeed, the university said much the same to The Intercept in a request for comment, though the sharpness of the original response, that she did not graduate from Antioch University, is shaded a bit. Based on our records, Ms. Reed was not conferred an undergraduate degree by our institution, said Rebecca Todd, the university's general counsel. And then oh, sorry, Jack, what were you going to say?
I just want to point out, the framing in the New York Times piece, that's quoted in your article there, Ryan. It really does, go out of its way, and this is, like a piece of reporting, right? This is not an opinion piece or anything like that.
Right.
Like, this goes out of its way to make it a choice and an intention by Tara Reid that she was harboring a secret. Like, she also harbored a secret. I don't think that there is any proof, or that it's reportable that this was a secret. You can say that Antioch University says that she did not, get conferred a graduate degree, but I don't think you can, if you're doing objective reporting, say that this was a secret that was being harbored unequivocally.
Yeah, and on top of that, the second half of that sentence says she didn't have the degree required for admission. But what's interesting about that is the records do show that according to the law school, she had given them everything that they required for her admission. So
It's
both
factually
ends
incorrect.
of that one line are just factually the latter is factually incorrect, like conclusively 100% incorrect. The former is dubious, and unless they have reporting that we don't know about, they made a leap that can't be supported by the evidence that exists.
Right. Like you'd have to show Tara Reid said to her friend, by the way, I didn't graduate, but make sure that they don't know that. Like you can't conflate not having a certain thing. I almost don't want to say it because it's like just a suggestion of repeating it again and again. But like, again, you can't, there's absolutely no, you can't, it's like goes to motive without any evidence of it at all. Right. And they can't prove it wasn't a mistake. But I can't believe I keep saying that because we don't even know that there was one. But they certainly, even within their sloppy read of it, they can't prove that it was.
Right, and normally, like in the case with Oteba, I actually didn't say he lied in the article, and I gave him a chance to respond. He didn't have any explanation, and so at that point you can say, well,
sure.
The guy just didn't graduate. He's not even contesting it. But she actually did say, like, look, here's what happened. Here's my explanation, and that doesn't appear anywhere in the story. Like, not even a line that says, CNN kind of misconstrued her. I was in a program when Antioch saying, well, there is no such program, and so at least they pretended to confront that discrepancy. But yeah, the Times just kind of breezed past it and just state as a fact she was harboring this secret that she didn't have what was required to be admitted, when the actual documents show that the law school did tell her she had what was required to be admitted.
Yeah, it's all. And
whether that's a degree, like, we still don't 100% know what on earth happened with those records.
Right. But I think it also just speaks to how, like, the sense of impunity with which they report on things. Like, if this had been a powerful woman with, political connections, or who was teaching, at Stanford, a psychologist at Stanford, right? Like, they wouldn't have so casually cast these aspersions without more backup. Like, it's just kind of stunning, and especially because. And
I think, I can tell you as a journalist that people feel the Times wasn't the first. The CNN was the first to report it. People can get looser once something's been reported publicly.
Yeah, you're just citing back to that. You're not
right.
Like,
and even though they
like primary
in typical Times fashion, they didn't credit and acknowledge that it had been reported before, but they knew it had been, and so they felt more comfortable. And in some ways, maybe so that they didn't feel like they were just completely biting CNN's reporting, maybe that contributed to the editors wanting to dial it up a notch.
Right, yeah. And the other thing is that we now know from these letters, so from these documents provided by, this is funny, yeah, Antioch is notoriously bad with records. I mean, clearly they are, because they couldn't provide stuff. They referred, and the law school was like, what's up with this? And they're like, oh yeah, we put it in we put it in her file. They couldn't find it. But like, it's so funny because like, this would require such a conspiracy of like, either a total genius, like in Tara Reid pulling the wool over the eyes of a law school.
How many lawyers are out there that didn't go to school? How many? We have to uncover this. How many cases need to be overturned at this point?
So many. Okay, yeah, I know soda's bad for me. Thank you, and I'm certainly not advertising for Pepsi. In fact, I'm really undercaffeinated, so sorry about that. Someone said I look like Marie Antoinette. I get it. I don't. I may look. I have her hairdo, but I don't do the. At least I don't vote like her, like Kirsten Sinema. Yeah. So one of the things about this also is that these documents show someone writing. Wait, let me see if I can. Sorry, I have these things, but I don't think I can share them. We're gonna have to do a follow-up on this where I have everything in a Google Doc. But the documents.
There's the whole faculty thing, yeah.
Yeah, the faculty thing, right? So they were unequivocal, right? I think this was Politico reporting. They said that
CNN too.
And CNN too. Last week I think
AP as well.
Yeah. AP, yeah. So let's see, Reed, the former Joe Biden staffer who recently accused him of sexually assaulting her in 93, stated she had an undergraduate degree that her college says she never earned and appears to have exaggerated her role in then Delaware Senator Biden's office, according to trial transcripts in 2 court cases reviewed by Politico. They don't really explain why. But here's the thing, ready? The resume cites a BA from Antioch as well as separate work for the university. Ongoing online visiting professor since 2007 for various student BA packet reviews. Review the final papers with students via phone and email, provide guidance for the final BA. Reads one line from her resume. A university official confirmed that Reed was not a faculty member, though she did several hours of administrative work as an independent contractor over 2008 to 2010. So this is interesting because one of the things collected in the documents is a letter that Antioch wrote to someone, not to Tara, but to someone else, where they describe this exact position, right? And they say you are considered affiliate faculty. They kind of say like you're not going to get paid a lot, so it's kind of an honorary thing, and you are affiliate faculty. So again, they just took the word of this totally like flaky and also now kind of gouging, financially gouging institution that can't keep track of its paperwork. They took their word at it, and also, so that's also something that very black and white. The New York, like everyone who reported she was not affiliate faculty needs to update it and correct it. There's like it's not. There's no like nuance there. They just said she wasn't, and they didn't have the proof to say that. So there should be at least a retraction and a correction. And the other thing is that, of course, Antioch, if she didn't graduate from Antioch, why did they give her a position? I mean, any position. Like, presumably you wouldn't want her being a custodian, like a janitor in your school if she had, like, tricked everyone about graduating, much less an affiliate faculty member.
And it's an even tighter connection than that, too, because in order to have met the criteria for graduation, she would have had to complete this prior learning project. It's a BA completion program, where you can earn up to, at the time you could earn up to 60 credits by writing a paper and taking some courses that talk about your life experience. And so it's for these kind of mid-career people. And she had worked in the California state legislature, and obviously she had also worked in the United States Senate. And so there are records in her file about a draft of that project having been written, but there's no record of it having been completed in her file. If it was completed, then essentially, she met all of the requirements conclusively. What's so interesting is that, like you said, she was then brought back for 3 years to grade and evaluate and kind of guide undergraduate students through this very same project, which raises 2 possibilities. Either she did it, she finished her project, and the school was happy with it and was eager to have her, come back and be this affiliate faculty who helped evaluate projects, or she never finished it, yet somehow the school still felt it was appropriate to have somebody who never finished their project be an evaluator of somebody else's projects. And if that's the case, that would mean that they just completely lost track of all of their paperwork and didn't even realize that she hadn't finished it, which then undermines all your credibility in their paperwork. So it's impossible to say with certainty which of those 2 things is possible. She says she remembers finishing it, and the Antioch at this point, if you noticed in that language that they're using, they've softened their claim. Rather than the blanket, she did not graduate, they now say, based on our records, she was not conferred a degree, which is true. Like, based on their records, she wasn't.
On our sloppy ass, flaky ass records.
Yeah. They're putting it all on their records.
Right. And in the end, once again, we'd say that whether or not Tara Reid created whatever diorama she needed to create for the school project, like, really doesn't have very much to do with the accusations being made, and that she did, and it is on record, and the law school agrees, she did graduate from law school. So in the end, it's all just it is upsetting because this was used as a way to discredit someone, and it has nothing to do even with the accusation, and even the discrediting can be discredited.
And the most disingenuous meme that I've seen floating out there is this concern that people pretend to have that innocent people might have been convicted. So in other words, if she didn't have like that somehow, she served as an expert witness in not fewer than a dozen cases, just under a dozen cases, domestic violence cases. So these are people who were charged and convicted of abusing their partner. And so in those cases, what the state or the county usually does is they bring somebody in that just describes what domestic violence is, what its psychological impact is, and that might help shed light on the victim's testimony, or what. It's a fairly standard but small part of the trial. And so these people were convicted, and people have the gall to suggest that because of this undergraduate situation, that some people were falsely convicted of domestic violence and are sitting there in prison. You're like, you don't believe, like, you don't believe that, like, no,
right?
No, nobody who's making that claim could possibly actually think that. But it just goes to show how bad faith so much of this is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also, and if they do believe that, like, they should be, I mean, it's not even worth getting into, but like, if they do believe that, then they should be glad that this was all uncovered. But yeah, they don't believe that. No one's like, well,
but also it's ridiculous. Like,
I know, it's so ridiculous.
It's just like, so if she wasn't the expert, some other expert would have talked about the trauma of domestic violence. Like,
right.
It didn't.
I know. How is that person? Yeah, exactly. She was not a witness she's not like a eyewitness. It's not like she said, I was there, I saw this person hit her. She's literally saying domestic violence is like bad or traumatic or whatever it is. That has nothing to do.
And by the way, also, this in the end, people sort of seized on the idea that there were going to be this, sort of reinvestigation of perjury on these cases, I guess, to exculpate domestic abuse, perpetrators, in the end, like, that is kind of what was where, like, a lot of our sort of mainstream liberals were cheering on, like, yes, like, exculpate these like domestic abuse committers.
Yeah. Which, of course, another irony is, like, if we want to go there, it's like, these people, unlike me and probably you, Jack, like, we don't particularly believe in, like, handling this stuff this way. But obviously these people do. Like, these resistance libs are not really looking into, like, alternatives to incarceration. Like, that's not their thing. Right. But that's, again, we're getting, like, way into the hypothetical, philosophical weeds. But, something that I really, really hated when covering this story and interviewing Tara was this really disingenuous claim that, like, someone called this, by the way, part of the Bernie media industrial complex. I don't know if you saw that. It's a good. I identify as that, sure, whatever. But people kept saying, like, it's just so unfortunate. It was, you know what it was? It was like, remember when Republicans were like, she's not a liar, Blasey Ford. She just is misremembering. It's just there's so much trauma, she just doesn't remember it. So the equivalent of that on the left was like, Tara is not at fault. It's these people who put her out there for political motives. They sacrificed her. They threw her under the bus, and they threw Me Too under the bus. And it's like, if you want to have a nuanced conversation about how to report on Me Too stuff, or how to cover it, in my case, how to interview someone on Me Too stuff, that's fine. But don't pretend that there was any standard that was upheld by the New York Times, by Washington Post, by Politico, by CNN, because they all reported on Blasey Ford within a few days. Nothing that they found on Tara, which again, I don't think is relevant, but if you want to pretend that was due diligence, nothing that they found on Tara would have been found within those few days on Blasey Ford. They wouldn't have gone to her undergraduate institution. They wouldn't have tracked down all of her landlords. So it's total bullshit. Just own it. Just say like, oh, it's awkward because this isn't politically convenient. Or even be like, no one really wants to say this, but if you want to have a kind of a discussion about how to report on these things or how to talk about Me Too things, but it's totally disingenuous. They just couldn't handle it, and they didn't know how to deal with it and reconcile what they were doing.
Well, that whole line of argument is also undercut by the timing, because for all intents and purposes, the primary was over. Like, I had already written a column with Jeremy Scahill saying that Biden should make Bernie his VP. This was before Biden said it was going to be a woman of color. Right. So like, it was done. Like, after Super Tuesday, when Biden just kind of waxed him there in South Carolina, it was over. In order, like, even if you want to like impute the worst possible motives to somebody, you would also need opportunity. Like, motive without opportunity, you don't have anything. And it was over. Like, the race was completely over. The only connection you could possibly draw, I think, would be that as she was looking for journalists who would, give her story a fair hearing, she looked for ones that were kind of sympathetic to her own type of politics. Like, if you're like a right-wing woman who's been assaulted by Ted Cruz, you probably, you might reach out to the Daily Caller. So she, through intermediaries, worked her way to reporters. So, but yeah, the idea that it was some grand plan,
or that we pressured her to tell the story,
or
we went out and looked, like, or the campaign, like, this is like, Bernie wouldn't even talk about his lies on Social Security. Like, anyone on his campaign is going to come out like trying to plant something, or even like just get someone to report on it. Like, it couldn't be farther from the truth, honestly. And again, she had wanted to tell her story, and and the sad thing, like, you brought up right-wing media. Like, I said this in a Guardian piece that I wrote, an op-ed, which was like, I didn't want her to be Juanita Broaddrick, which is what happened with Juanita Broaddrick, is that no one would tell her story. And she was ignored. She was maligned. And then Donald Trump, the total opportunist that he is, gave her a chance to tell her story. And she became a Trump person. And then what happened with Tara? No one in the liberal media would report on her stuff. So where did she go ultimately? She had to go on these crazy right-wing networks, although she never adopted their talking, like Broaddrick, who I totally believe. I mean, I've done an episode on that. I should do another one with her. I find a lot of her political ideas pretty like repugnant, and I absolutely believe her. And she was totally like dragged through the mud. But like Tara, people should be grateful that she didn't move in that direction. And they should also be grateful, like, everyone upset about the timing. It's like, if that had come out earlier, it would have killed him in the primary, I think. Although, who knows? Because they did such good, they ran such good interference for him. And if it had come out later, I mean, if Trump would have loved to have this last minute. If he had that last minute to bring up,
right, and he only needed a 0.7% swing in like 3 states, and he wins. So that is interesting. Like, in some ways, it was perfectly timed for Biden, because I think you're right that like the media would not have treated it the same way if there were a primary, because at that point, let the Democrats fight it out. But when it's the general election, which it was, even though Bernie had not, officially, I don't think he had officially dropped out yet, because there was like Wisconsin or whatever still. He was done. So it was general election time. That's why Biden was talking about naming his vice president. Right.
We got a compliment, by the way, from Mexico. Great work, guys. Keep going from Mexico City. See?
All right.
But yeah, it's just really upsetting. Has the Times responded to this?
Not to my story. They responded to Reed's attorney and said, well, I mean, they gave me a comment for the story, which was we believe our story is accurate, and they sent Reed's attorney a slightly longer letter that essentially says the same thing.
Right, and says that they made no mistakes, right?
That nothing was inaccurate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like, yeah, things were inaccurate. Like, didn't they allege that that they didn't imply she was lying? How do you harbor a secret without lying? It's not like the only way to harbor something. Jack, you're good at these word games. How would you harbor a secret without lying? Could you have it under your pant leg in your sock without knowing it?
Harboring a secret. Let me try to think about how you could be harbor to a secret.
I was harboring a $5 bill in my pocket. Didn't know it.
That's the only way you could do it. Right?
Maybe those two sentences are not connected to each other, and it was a different secret they were talking about, and then separately
she has an
she
online
also
shopping
hadn't.
problem.
Yeah, she was harboring a secret. We all have secrets. We all harbor secrets in our lives.
It's still a secret.
And then, of course, unrelated to that, the records show she hadn't graduated from Antioch College. So,
who are you? And you're going to actually, Ryan and Tara Reid and Tara Reid's lawyer, how dare you suggest that no one harbors any secrets? That you have no credibility. You are a liar, sir.
Wow. You're saying that people don't have secrets?
Wow.
I have secrets I've only told my best friend. And they're sworn by pinky swear to secrecy. So they're definitely still secrets.
And they're harboring your secret. So maybe she was harboring somebody else's secret.
It's true.
Something. Oh, that's the Madonna song. My Baby's Got a Secret. Remember that?
Yes.
It's coming full circle, yeah. And anything else you want to make sure people know about? We're going to do more stories on this, and Jack and I are going to talk about it in a way that you probably don't feel comfortable, because we're going to make some demands that you don't want to be on screen for. But anything else you want to make sure that people know about?
I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll do more on this, and anything you want to say about comparing the Blasey Ford stuff to the what say ye to the conscientious feminists who are just so upset, quote unquote feminists, who are so upset that Tara and the Me Too movement were ruined. Like Michelle Goldberg said, that part of the reason that no one is doing anything about Cuomo, although they are now, but is because of these other allegations. But you don't have to go there. Just tell me about tell me your what. Just compare the Blasey Ford to the Reid, if you will.
Well, with the there were different situations in the sense that you after the Blasey Ford reporting, you immediately had senators talking publicly about the situation, talking to each other, which was reported, and then making public statements. And like we said earlier, like the media feels much more comfortable, and much looser once the cat is out of the bag, once something is out, and once public figures are talking about it, because then they're no longer saying that it's valid or not. They're just saying, well, hey, this is what this public figure said. But there is a real discrepancy in the benefit of the doubt that was given to each of them. And I think anybody who watched it unfold would certainly agree with that. And somebody could come away from that and be like, well, you know what? That's because they believed Christine Blasey Ford and they just didn't believe Tara Reid. And then but then you have to go back to, well, why is that? And how is that different from 10, 15 years ago when the first impulse was, I don't believe that.
Right.
So
anyway, well, we'll have to have you back on to talk more about this, because I'm sure there's going to be, well, who knows? I wonder how they will respond. Probably just ignoring you.
Yeah.
And
they might. That's what I would do if I were them.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to do it. We're going to do one of those, it's been X number of days. Remember that Keith Olbermann, since Bush declared mission accomplished? Well, it's been X number of days since the New York Times was asked to retract, correct, I mean, they also did other things like stealth edits. Jack and I can get into that though. Well, thank you, Ryan.
You got it.
It's not a.
No, it's not a huge ask.
It's not a huge ask. That's the other thing. Say she's a. We all know you're never going to pretend that you're never going to like treat her with any dignity or fairness. But at least like look like you're not totally regurgitating talking points and in the tank for someone. I'm giving you. I don't know why I shouldn't be helping you, New York Times. But if you want to do that, you'll be a more effective lackey for Biden if every now and then you pretend that you care about when you make mistakes. And look, I'll say I could say you are harboring a secret about your intentions and your motives and your relationship with the Biden campaign and how you conveniently literally changed your text so it matched a Biden campaign talking note sheet that they gave out. But I'm not going to say you're harboring a secret. I'm going to say you simply made a mistake. So I'm fairer about the New York Times than the New York Times is about Tara Reid, and I'm not the gray lady. Anyway. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ryan.
Right. Have a good Sunday.
Nice to meet you. See you later.
Bye. Wow. You know what?
Wow.
Wow.